Sam, and welcome to GBN Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Now, after years of soup-slinging, motorway mayhem and Van Gogh vandalism, Just Stop Oil is finally calling it a day. The eco-activist group notorious for blocking roads and disrupting major events announced it will halt protests after Ed Miliband seemed to adopt their key demand, phasing out fossil fuels. Their swan song? One last demo in Parliament Square on April the 26th before they officially hang up their orange high-vis vests. But while the paint throwing and slow marching might be over, the group has warned this isn't the end of civil resistance. Well, a new, more radical strategy is apparently in the works. You'll be delighted to hear. And I'm now joined by Sue Houseman, a spokesperson for Just Stop Oil. Sue, welcome to the show. So what prompted Just Stop Oil to finally stop flinging orange paint about?
Thanks for having me on. The reason that we've changed our tactics today is that we've had success. You know, we've got no new oil licenses agreed by all parties, and as you say, Labour have taken that on board, but it's not the end for us because there's so much left to do. You know, the government are on track to deliver what they should be delivering, and our future's in peril. So it's time for us to just have a take stock of what we've achieved so far and where we're going to go, and look at plenty of the other crises that seem to be around at the moment and also require our attention.
So, Sue, you've just admitted there what I think many of us suspected. Just Stop Oil has just stopped because Ed Miliband has just stopped oil and he's just stopped gas. And it looks like today he's going to stop steel as well in Britain. So ostensibly, the Labour Party has become the political wing of Just Stop Oil. Therefore, you guys are redundant.
I think the Labour Party are doing a very good job of helping the billionaires to get richer. And as you'll know, lots of ordinary people are really feeling the pinch here. And what we want to do is unite with every ordinary person to get a livable future. And so our tactics are to have a look at where we're being failed in the Houses of Parliament, where we're being failed by the media, might I say, and where we're being failed in the courts. Because at the moment, what's come to light for us in Just Stop Oil is that this is a huge issue that with our whole system in the UK and around the world. The drift to fascism, the uncertainty with war and the neoliberalism, you know, this drive to get more and more out of ordinary working people and to give more and more profits to rich. We've really got to look at this because this is what's underpegging the climate crisis.
But Sue, the reason that ordinary working people are so brassic and out of pocket is because of their energy bills. Net zero is making people net poorer, and we can't live off windmills and solar panels. It stops, the wind stops, the sun goes in. We'd be far better off if we just started oil. Start drilling, drill baby drill. Let's get that shale out of the ground, trillions of pounds worth of liquid gold underneath our feet. I can see you're blanching, but the fact of the matter is Britain has the highest energy prices in all of the Western world, and that's because of net zero. It's because we're just stopping oil.
I'm actually giggling at you there because obviously the way to bring our prices down is to move on to renewables. At the moment,
when would that happen?
We give money. Let me just finish. We give money to these oil companies who are making billions of pounds and paying out billions of pounds in dividends.
They get 85% taxed.
Just give me a second. We give them tax incentives. We let them off the hook. We just allow them. Our government gives them money back from the taxpayer. How can that be right?
But they get taxed 85%. There's an 85% windfall tax on anybody trying to start a new licence, which, by the way, they haven't even granted. And the answer isn't to be reliant on Putin or importation. We're in this insane position where, whether you like it or not, Sue, 70% of our entire energy demands in the country comes from fossil fuels, and that won't change anytime soon because we simply don't have enough dependable, reliable, cheap, green energy. Take the subsidies away and that sector dies.
we've got enough oil to keep us going while we move to renewables. And you talk about the issues there with steel. You know, we've known for 50 years that we need to do something about fossil fuels. The oil companies have known, the governments have known, the billionaires have known. But have they made the necessary steps? No. Are they taxing those billionaires to pay for the steps that need to be taken? No. Who's going to suffer? Ordinary working people, the people who work in steel, not the people who take billions out.
Nobody works in steel. It's all closing down. That's the point. And we're reliant, Sue, on importing steel now from China. China that powers its blast furnaces in a way that would appall people like yourself. All we do is offshore our manufacture of steel. We offshore our oil. We're importing oil from Norway that extracts oil from the same gas field we've got in the North Sea. It's insane.
And without Just Stop Oil, we'd have been giving away billions more to Equinor in order to drill again. Why are we paying people to take oil? And then why are we making ordinary people buy it back at market rates? It just is an absolute corrupt state. And I'd love your show to be doing some investigating into this. How can it be that our government is giving tax breaks to oil companies that are making billions?
They tax them at 85%, Sue.
People looked
Sue, there's an 85% windfall tax on every single drop of oil that comes out of the North Sea. How is that a tax break? It's the most punitive. It's so punitive, nobody wants to drill in those fields, even if they're allowed, which they're not, because Ed Miliband is Just Stop Oil personified.
It's so amusing to listen to you.
Why is it?
Everybody would take a cut in their electricity bills if we had a sensible move to renewables.
Yes, we would. And that hasn't happened, and it won't happen anytime soon, because renewable energy isn't cheaper, despite all the promises that was made by people like yourself. When do we get these mythical unicorn cheaper bills from green energy?
When we get a government who'll act in the interests of the people rather than the billionaires. If that had been happening 50 years ago, when we knew that the oil companies knew that fossil fuels were causing this catastrophe, if we'd started then, if we'd have started 10 years ago, if we'd have started 5 years ago, but what Just Stop Oil wanted is for them to start now and to really push for it. But what we realise is it's not that we can't do it. It's that there's no desire to do it. And the reason there's no desire to do it is because our politicians are owned by the fossil fuel company. Our media are owned by millionaires who have big stakes in the fossil fuel industry. And they just keep telling us that we can't do it.
You admitted at the top of this interview, Sue, you admitted at the top of the interview that Just Stop Oil has wound its operations down because Ed Miliband has just stopped oil. He's made you redundant.
We're no longer calling for no new oil and gas licenses because it's been achieved, because we've been so successful.
Thanks to Ed Miliband.
And it's so amusing to hear you, because obviously Just Stop Oil have done a brilliant job, because everybody's heard of them, everybody knows about them. And given that we've made everybody poorer, we now need to redirect our attention to a broken system that is causing absolute misery to ordinary people. We're getting poorer and poorer year on year, and the billionaires are getting richer. And it's all tied up. The oil's tied up in that. Our waters, our rivers, our education systems, in every aspect of our services, money has been siphoned from the public purse into the hands of the billionaires. And that's why our last thing that we want to do with Just Stop Oil on the 26th of April is get to Parliament, because that's the centre of all this. Parliament's
on your side, Sue. Every major party agrees with you. They agree with net zero. They agree with suspending licences. They're filling concrete into our shale wells. You've won, and we're all getting colder and poorer. Well done.
We haven't won, because we're still burning that oil. And until we can start to use more renewables, until we can do things like give free buses to people who need them, so that they don't
and a free
have
unicorn
to keep running
for every
the car.
viewer.
When
right,
we
Sue
start
Houseman.
to do this, then Just Stop Oil won't need to do. But until then, we don't need to call for new oil and gas licenses, but we do need to regroup and we need to pull together these crises. You know, we've seen recently, we've seen the post office
so I'm
scandal.
afraid we have to leave it there. We've ran
Brandon.
out of gas. Click, there goes the meter. Thank you very much, Sue Houseman, spokesperson for Just Stop Oil. Well, joining now on the panel to discuss this is the Labour peer, Lord Glassman, who got locked in the House of Lords, I understand. But you're with us, living and breathing, and the former Conservative MP, Michael Brown. Lord Glassman, going to start with you. What do you make of the fact that Just Stop Oil have basically wound down because Ed Miliband is Mr. Just Stop Oil?
Well, I think it was judgments. It was legal judgments about the oil wells, and I really oppose that. I oppose that very much. I think we have to really invest in nuclear, but I do think that there's still a future for fossil fuels, and we desperately need to reindustrialise. We desperately need heat. We desperately need to bring the price of energy down. I think the whole future of the country depends on that. And this is completely ridiculous. And while it's a great thing that Just Stop Oil are winding down, I hope they wind down permanently.
So you hope that Just Stop Oil just stop. Michael Brown, you were saying to me earlier, you were the Member of Parliament for the Scunthorpe area.
Indeed.
Today, of course, we're seeing the tragedy, I believe, the tragedy now of Britain being the only G20 nation that can't smelt its own steel. And is that a part of this deindustrialisation that you get so passionate about, Lord Glassman? And it's being driven by this zealotry. We can't power our furnaces, electric or coke, because of either pollution or they're too expensive.
Well, I think that the lady, Sue Houseman, who spoke just now, giggling away, I can tell you who are not giggling tonight. Those wonderful steel workers. It's not just the 2,500 people who work directly at British Steel in Scunthorpe, which I had the privilege of representing in the 1980s, after I became the first Tory MP since God knows when in 1979. And we were able to keep that steelworks going for decades. And the reason it's closing is very simple. It's Just Stop Oil. She says that she's got into the ear of Ed Miliband, and I suspect that that is probably the case, Martin. One, she's probably given up the battle because the public were not on her side anymore. They were fed up with all the protests or closing the motorways and all the rest of that nonsense. But also, Ed Miliband, I'm afraid, who I like personally very much. She used to be a Member of Parliament in my old part of the woods in Doncaster. He, I'm afraid, has been responsible, unilaterally almost, for closing down that wonderful steelworks. And what it's going to mean is, as you alluded to just now, it's going to mean that the steel that we will import, probably from China, blast furnaces powered by coal, coal mining, coal power stations are opening every week virtually. So the world is going to be no cleaner. It's going to be just as dirty, except that those 2,500 people, you can probably treble that, 7,500 people in the greater Scunthorpe area who will also lose their jobs. They will have been watching her just now, and they wouldn't have been laughing and joking. They would have been wondering what the hell's going to happen to their futures. And it's so sad. And also, by the way, you need blast furnace produced steel in order to make certain products which need raw steel.
That's it.
You cannot make it just from, even if the electric arc furnaces are able to be built in Scunthorpe. I'd like to see that, but we need that steelworks as it is.
Just 6 weeks ago, the Labour government were at the Scunthorpe steel plant saying that British steel will be used in their great rebuilding of the country. Today, they pulled the plug. Thank you to my panel, and thank you to Sue Glassman. Coming up next, the Sentencing Council.
Sue Glassman.
So, okay, coming up next, the Sentencing Council's woke new guidelines for illegal immigrants have been criticised as too tiered. Shockingly,